Bill, alcoholic. You want to introduce yourself?
Steve Lamb, alcoholic.
So, we didn't get a host. We have no host. And I was going to complain about the fact I didn't get a gift basket, but one showed up today. But we're okay. I've let it go. We have no moderator for this. We're just on our own here. And so when we were thinking about, we were asked the question, what do you want to call your workshop? And so Steve and I were sitting around thinking, and I said, behavior modification. People might show up to that. You know? So we don't really know anything about that. So what happens to us when we get sober? We all have had the experience of being struck sober. On March the 27th, 1985, my whole life changed. I didn't realize that until really probably about 6 months later. I had done a fifth step, and I walked in my house, and after sitting quiet for an hour or so and reflecting on what I'd done, and I walked into my house, and it struck me. I remember clearly thinking, it's going to be like this now. Now, I had no idea really what this was, but I knew the old stuff was over. Whatever that was gone. And 34 years later, so far, so good. And all of us, everybody in this room, every alcoholic in this room has had that experience. Some of us may be a little bit more aware of what that was than others, maybe. But my experience is the longer I'm sober, the more significant that day has become. The more reflection I have about it. And we're on this spiritual path, you start thinking about stuff like that. You know, as human beings, we want to understand, which I'm convinced is the booby prize. Because the experience is so profound, whatever concept I apply to it is kind of irrelevant. I mean, it might comfort me, which is fine. I mean, but the truth of it, what's truth? Reality. Do I have trouble with reality? Yes. So the truth is a nebulous thing to me. And I believe what's going on in this recovery process is you and I are growing up emotionally. That's the experience. Now, every speaker you've ever heard, at some point in his pitch, usually the beginning, talks about, long before he or she ever really started drinking, that they felt separate. They felt weird and strange and uncomfortable and gawky and geeky, and I don't look right, and other people look better than me, and I'm clearly adopted, and the aliens have dropped me off, and I'm waiting for the mothership to return, and we have all these cute ways of describing this, and sometimes we apply it to alcoholism, that I had alcoholism long before I drank, that somehow that this feeling of separation is part of the disease. I don't believe that at all. I think all kids, if anybody here has had the experience of raising children, they're all aliens, you know. And you watch them, I mean, they're self-centered, and the problem is that they're more self-centered than we are. It's competition, you know. And I believe they're appropriately self-centered. It seems to be that that's part of the growing up process. And every kid feels weird. And some of us have grown up in dark places that no child should ever be raised in. I get that. I understand that. But all kids feel this weirdness, this creepiness, this what's wrong with me, and everybody else was given the book of rules and I wasn't there, and all this kind of stuff. I think what happened with you and I is that somewhere in our teen years, maybe a little earlier for some of us, we started medicating that feeling. We medicated it. And we get a bang out of that medication that other people don't get. I mean, alcoholics drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Period. You know, if they got a bang out of it like we did, if they had the spiritual experience that we had, they would drink more. You know, I mean, that's why we do it. You heard it last night, sitting on the bar stool, you know. I'm safe on the bar stool, you know. This is... Diana should never drink again. It's just... she needs to modify her behavior.
I think she's a genius.
Yeah. That's probably true. And now I've got all... You threw me off.
You were talking about yourself.
So... As I was saying, we medicated it. Now, I have two younger kids that are in their 30s now, and when I got sober, my daughter was 3 years sober and my son was 6 months old. My daughter was 3 years old. And I believe I literally grew up with them. A few years ago, we were having a Christmas Eve party at my house, and my son and daughter and I were in the front room just talking, and my daughter looked at me and she says, "You know, Dad, you've grown up quite a bit over the years." I was really pleased to hear that, you know. I'm the guy, sober, that gets kicked off the soccer field. I'm that dad. That guy. And when I got sober at 37 years old, I probably had the emotional development of maybe a 16-year-old on a good day. And this kid was not an honor student. He's the one with a little bit of a problem with authority. That kid. And I look grown up. I'm big and I look grown up and I clean up okay, but I'm not grown up, you know. You've unleashed me into the world, and I'm that same insecure, frightened little boy trying to act like a tough guy or trying to be something that he's not because he feels he's not good enough. I'm that kid, and I'm adult. I'm almost 40 years old, and I've got rage like I had when I was 12 and 13. I mean, there is something wrong with me. And you've taken away my medication, and it's raw. I mean, I cannot do you. The impact of your personality on me is devastating, you know. I need something in me all the time to cushion the blow of you on me, you know. I have social problems, you know, and so now I'm going to grow up, and I believe that you cannot speed that process up. Now that I'm awake, I'm going to have a series of experiences that I'm going to learn from. Now that I'm awake and I'm paying attention. But you can definitely slow the process down by picking and choosing what you will and won't do. We all do that. We don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't like to be in situations where I'm not in charge, where I don't understand the language, or with people that I don't know. I'm insecure, and I need to be in control and charge, that kind of a thing. And a lot of times in AA, I'm not. The most spiritual thing you'll hear in Alcoholics Anonymous is get in the car. Right? Well, where are we going? What do you care? What's on your social calendar? You know, how many people want you to come visit? Right? I got in the car. I don't know why. I got in the car. Two things happened to me when I walked into AA, which I think are both just pure luck. One is, I just liked it. It's not everybody's story. I just liked it. It just was interesting to me right from the start. My first meeting, I drove home. First meeting was a weird meeting, a lot of hooting and hollering and all this stuff. It was not what I was expecting at all. And I remember clearly driving home thinking, you know, this may not be so bad. You know, because I'm an old hippie from the 60s, man. Weird attracts me, you know. And AA is weird, you know. And Scott Redmond used to say, Alcoholics Anonymous has offered me a level of lameness that I didn't know was available, you know. And you got to lame up to get AA, you know. There truly is nothing sadder than watching somebody trying to be hip in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, really, you know. And the second thing that happened is I asked a man to help me, and he did, which doesn't always happen, you know. He told me, go home, read the doctor's opinion, be at my house Thursday at 5 o'clock, make some notes in the margin of what you agree with and don't, and we'll discuss it. And I went and did my assignment for some odd reason, because I informed him in the recovery place I went through that I'd already read all that stuff so we could start at level 2, you know. And he just ignored that and said, just do that and be at my house. And he didn't trust me that I'd read it, and he had me sit there and read it to him out loud. I've done a lot of workshops over the years on sponsorship. Rule number 1, make sure they read the book. Don't trust them, read it with them. It'll probably help you, you know. And, you know, if I read that doggerel on the tombstone one more time, I'm going to shoot myself, you know. And things began to change. But here's what it looked like for me. I'm coaching soccer. This is some years into sobriety. I'm coaching soccer. I think it was some 8 or 9-year-old kids. And they were really a crummy team. They were really bad. And we were losing the first half like 5 or 6 to nothing. And I gave these kids a lecture at halftime on personal pride. And I said, you need to go out there and start knocking some people over. You know, you can't just allow them to humiliate you like this. This is not right. And, you know, you can imagine what they look like. Mr. Cleveland telling us we can hit people. You know, it's like, and so the game starts back up. And I rode my Harley because I'm a badass. And it's parked in the parking lot, which is really the basketball courts in this middle school, right? Just parked there. So they're still losing. They scored a couple more points, and I just walked off the field and left them. I couldn't. It was humiliating. And I jumped on my Harley, and I burned rubber out of the parking lot right through the basketball courts, right? Because I'm a badass. And I'm roaring down the street, and I run out of gas. It's hard to look cool with your leather jacket and your helmet as you're walking down the street. And I get home and I call my sponsor. I mean, it was bad enough I actually called my sponsor. And I told him what I'd done and why. Because I have an explanation for that kind of behavior. There's an explanation. It doesn't come from a vacuum. It's motivated by forces outside myself that need my response. And this is how I respond. This is what it looks like, you know, when you're 42 years old, you know, and coaching soccer, trying to, you know, encourage young people, you know. And he said to me on the phone, Bill, it's children's sports. And I actually said, you don't understand. So how does behavior get modified? Through a series of humiliations. The end result of humiliation is humility. You know? I mean, if you don't run away from it, you will get to the other side of it. If you don't run away from it. Now, one of the things that we learn here in Alcoholics Anonymous, which sometimes I think is secret information, but it shouldn't be, is we learn to take responsibility for our own lives. And for people like us that have rationalized and justified negative behavior for a long, long time, that is a spiritual experience. Here's what I think is going on. I'm a product of mental institutions and, you know, I was 22 years old. I was in the Oregon State Mental Institution because I needed a rest. And, you know, I'm the surfer and a biker and a tough guy. And I never went to the beach. My motorcycle rarely ran, and I was afraid to fight. But I looked really good. I had a chrome Nazi helmet for a hat and a primary chain for a belt and black greasy Levi's and big black boots with chains around them. I've got tattoos all over me, but I had a clip-on earring because I didn't want to hurt myself. This one's for Barkley. My biker nickname was Horny. I have it tattooed on my arm here, and it's misspelled. It's H-O-R-N-E-Y. Horny. With an exclamation mark on the end for emphasis. Emphasis. That's pretty much all you need to know. Right? So, you know, I get sober, I end up in Alcoholics Anonymous. In the recovery program I went through, I was 37, and like any good gangster, when it was over, I called my mom. She came and got me and checked me into this recovery place, and while I was in there, they made me wear a sign around my neck. I had to make the sign. We made it in crafts. And there was a little rectangular piece of cardboard with a string that went through it, and it said, "I am not a counselor." Because evidently there was some confusion about that. And so I take on roles, is what I do. I take on roles. I'm the guy that'll walk into a room and I'll stand off on the side a little bit and listen to how you're talking and what you're saying, and I'll rehearse it in my head, and then I'll walk out there and act like you, talk like you, and preferably try to become president of whatever's going on, you know, because then I'll be okay with enough recognition, you know. Evidently, there's not enough attention in the known universe to satisfy me based upon my behavior, you know, and this is what I do, and I come into AA with this skill set. Am I conscious of it? Not really. I mean, sometimes. But where you do get conscious of it is when you know there is an alternative and you're not taking it. There's a period I think all of us go through where we know this isn't serving me well. This isn't right, but I can't seem to stop. There's the slow death of the ego. The slow, very painful, sometimes traumatic death of who we think we are. This sense of self that has ruled us. The misperception of who we think we are. We believe that we are our thinking mind. And at some point you start to realize that no, that's not who I am. But then what? Then what? When I'm in the void, in that space where I'm leaving something that's comfortable and warm, even though it might be stinky and shitty, but it's familiar. And I know that place, and I know how to behave, and I'm entering into a new world where I don't get it, but I know this is where I'm going. That's a painful transition. Transformation, by its very nature, is painful. It's painful for all of us. So the first step says that we're powerless, and they said that we were just powerless over alcohol because they didn't want us to run screaming down the street, right? My experience is I am utterly, completely powerless over absolutely everything. There's nothing I seem to have any control over. And I'm convinced if you were just a little bit different, the two of us would be a lot happier. And you absolutely insist upon living your own life, even with the positive input that I'm giving you. And this pisses me off at my core, right? Because you won't adhere. Never mind. So I am clearly not in control of the geopolitical situation in the world. Look at it. You know, I mean, there's nothing that I seem to have any control over. And what you and I do is we look out into the world, we look out into nature, and we determine that some things are good and some things are bad. That does not exist in nature. There's no morality in nature. Things just are. And we label them good and bad. That is the source of all the suffering in my life. The fact that I determine that some stuff is good and some is bad. Now, when I determine it's bad and it should be different, it doesn't change. It stays the same. And I suffer. Now, in life, there's pain. People die, stuff happens, we get sick, things happen. Then I determine that it should not have occurred, that there was some kind of injustice. Something is wrong here. Now I've laid a layer of suffering over the pain that will last much longer than the pain of the event itself. This is called resentment. This is how I get to you. The world isn't right. There's a darkness around us that needs to change, and it's not changing, and I suffer because of that. If I can grasp that powerlessness just a little bit, just the drugs and the alcohol part, just the simple stuff, the real clear stuff that's present in my life, then the second step becomes operational. I need to be restored to sanity, and evidently there must be some power that's greater than what I'm doing here, because there is a synergy about stuff. I need to tap into this power and be restored to sanity. Enough sanity not to drink and use, but also enough sanity to glimpse the powerlessness in a general way. To realize I am not in control. If I can do that just a little bit, the third step becomes operational. The third step's interesting. What it says is that I'm going to turn my life and will over to what already has it anyway. Now, I really think that it was good of them to allow us to think that we actually have some say in the matter. But I love the whole picture of, I've been withholding myself from the totality of all things long enough. I'm going to acquiesce now and allow you to take me. Thank you very much. Where's my trophy? What life and will is it talking about? The inventory. The end result of living a life with seeming power. Resentment, fear, and broken relationships. What else could I bring to the table but that? That's what I've got. And it's cranking around in my head all the time. The fifth step is how we consummate the third step. You want to turn it over? Do 4 and 5. And I'm going to write this down, and I'm going to, for the first time maybe in my life, I'm going to start taking responsibility for some of this stuff. Because what we're looking for is that fourth column. Howard Poland says that there's only 3 columns. But he died. So we're going to go with the 4. And I know he's going to get me for this. What were my faults and mistakes? That's what we're looking for. And many of us in here have sponsored people for a long time, and they're going down that resentment list, and they're very, very descriptive of why they're angry. And we're just waiting for them to move on from that and get to, well, what do you got in your 4th column? Well, nothing. My 4th column was like that in 1985. There wasn't a whole lot there. But I knew even then, this is what these people are looking for, because that's what we were talking about. 6 and 7 are 2 paragraphs. You say the prayer, it's over. And we'll be working those 2 steps for the rest of our lives. This is behavior modification. You have to identify it, right? What is it I'm doing? What is my little list? And you can see it in the 4th column. You can make a list if you want, but you don't really have to work on your character defects. They will come and visit you with alarming regularity. And it is just stunning. And then when you stick around here long enough, you don't even bother complaining to your sponsor or other people about what's good, because you know what they're going to say. Well, what did you do? You don't understand. I got into a fight. I was screaming at my wife, and I just turned blue, veins in my neck. This rage came out, and I'm screaming at her, because of what she said to me. It was bad enough, I actually went to see my sponsor, and I explained to him what happened, and he looked at me and he said, "Stop yelling at your wife." And I explained to him again what prompted the reaction, and he just kept repeating, "Stop yelling at your wife. It's about my behavior." It doesn't mean that nothing happened. Something happened. Things happen in life. And then I react, and that becomes the problem. Everybody forgets about what happened to cause the reaction. They're looking at me. I can't count the number of times. Sober. What is wrong with Bill? Dude, you overshot the mark again. 8 and 9 is where the transformation occurs. When I go to somebody that I don't ever want to see again and I make the amends, when I turn and walk away from that experience, I am changed. Right there, right then. It's immediate. It takes a while to process it. But when I confront that kind of fear, it'll change me. Your response is irrelevant. The fact that I actually did it, I begin to take responsibility for my life. I'm not a wimp anymore. I start feeling better about myself. People say put yourself at the top of the amends list. You've been your own worst enemy. That'll pretty much kill you. What I was told specifically, and I tell this to this day, 34 years later, put yourself at the bottom of the list. By the time you get there, you'll have some self-esteem. That's real. It's about action, isn't it? Now I've taken some action. I'm making amends. I am a blooded member of Alcoholics Anonymous now. I'm actually doing it. I'm going to be okay now. I'm part of the team. I'm in with the in crowd. I'm in with the secret society, the clique that's in AA. We have special underwear and secret handshakes and stuff, I mean, it's in. It's really there. It's a real thing. You know who it is? The people that work the steps. That's the cult, I've shaved my head, You can tell who the cult members are. Really. We have lightning bolts tattooed on our arm. Hornet. 10, 11, and 12 is where we live. 10, 11, and 12 are not the maintenance steps. 10, 11, and 12 are 85, 90% of the program. 10, 11, and 12 is the real work in Alcoholics Anonymous. 1 through 9 is Sober 101. It's the bare minimum. I've got to do this in order to have a message that has some depth and weight. And I've done it now. But 10, 11, and 12, 10 is about self-awareness as compared to self-obsession. Being able to watch yourself move through life. You're awake now. The awakening, it will evolve into an awareness where you're actually aware that you're awake and maybe there's something you can do with this. Maybe there's a reason why I'm here. Maybe there's something more I'm supposed to do. Maybe, just possibly, maybe it's not about me. I'm just saying, probably is about me, but maybe not. Maybe there's a chance. Maybe it's not about me. Maybe it isn't about me working on myself. Maybe that's finally over, In 11, in meditation, I can watch myself think. The experience of that is stunning. It's game-changing. Clearly, I'm not my thinking mind. If I was, I couldn't watch it. So now, who's the watcher? What is that? There's a lot of really good books about that. A lot of people talking about it. I don't have the answer for you, but it's really interesting, isn't it? It isn't about me. I don't have to respond. My egoic mind is flat and two-dimensional. It creates nothing. It just takes credit for shit. It just takes the past and projects it into the future over and over and over again, just constantly. It doesn't do anything else but that. And all I have to do is ignore it. I don't have to work on it. I don't have to analyze it. I don't have to do affirmations. I can just ignore the damn thing. Just don't respond to it. And in the silence, after a while, it slowly calms down, never goes away. It's part of who we are. It's not the enemy. We talk about it, my head's out to get me. It isn't out to get me. Why would it kill the host? It needs me for transportation, So it's just trying to help. It's just stupid, The 12th step is why we're here. You want to work on your character defects? Sponsor people. You'll run into every one of them. You want behavior modification? Sponsor the assholes. They're ungrateful, you know, like I'm dying. I had a liver transplant 2.5 years ago. I'm dying, man. I'm literally dying. I'm in my house and dying. A guy calls me and goes, "How you doing?" So I start telling him, because it's dramatic. Then he interrupts me and starts talking about himself. It's stunning, stunning. Now I'm not angry, and I have a resentment now. They don't really care, you know. But I think their job is to get me out of myself. I think that's what it's all about. You know, is it inconvenient? Yes. I've just gotten used to being inconvenienced. But do I love them now? Yes, I do. I love them now. Do I have compassion now? Yes. I didn't know that I didn't have compassion. Character defects are one thing. They're obvious. What about the stuff in me that's missing completely? That's not there, that never developed? What about that? You know, I think that's almost more critical than the actual, you know, self-centered defects that are so obvious. What about the stuff that never developed in me? So what's happened to me around in these years, because you can see how spiritual I am now, you know, and you know, I've been transformed, you know. Later on in the other workshops, we'll talk about the sober collapse, but the way we modify our behavior, living life, being awake, being aware, and watching yourself move through life. Thank you.
You guys, the hotel came, they're going to start towing cars that are parked on that drive coming up and down the entrance and the exit because the shuttle cannot get through. There's plenty of parking in the back, and someone's parked over by this stop sign that needs to move their big car because it's blocking people turning. I'm very sorry.
Did you all hear that? You got to move your cars if it's in the driveway. It's about behavior modification.
Steve Lamb, alcoholic. For those of you moving your cars, we won't tell anybody. Don't worry about it. It's okay. I want to start with a little translational for my friend Bill. For the people who are not familiar with Bill, when he uses words like a-hole, what he means is child of God. Okay, just so you understand that. I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
You know, when I don't recall it that way, that we were having a discussion about this topic. I recall you doing a lot of talking and me going, "What? We're going to talk about what?" And he said behavior modification. And he's been sober a lot longer than I have. My sobriety day is July 27th, 1996. So he has no problem. Just he's got a very creative, active mind. But I'm a trial attorney by trade, and I like everything to be organized. You know, so when I think of behavior modification, what I think of is when I got here in Alcoholics Anonymous, people were telling me that I had to be rigorously honest. And then they were telling me to fake it until you make it. I had a little issue with that, you know, and unlike Bill, I did not fall in love with AA, and frankly, I didn't much care for you when I got here either. It didn't seem like a good idea. And they would say, fake it till you make it, and then other people would say, act as if. Now, as people who have been around here a while know that fake it until you make it is not in the big book at all. You know, it's certainly not in the big book. It's not in the 12 and 12. And neither is the phrase act as if. The phrase act as if does not appear in the big book, the first 164 pages, at least the basic text. And it doesn't appear in the 12 and 12. But it does show up a little bit later. And it shows up in a text by a guy named William James. And there's only one book referred to in the big book. That's The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, and he uses that phrase. But before I get to that, one of the things that I was thinking about is we talk a lot, and Bill talked a lot about transformation. We're trying to have a transformation, right? Because we come in and we're immature. And there's a Greek word called metanoia. And metanoia doesn't mean to change your mind. It means to have your mind changed. And when the New Testament was originally written, it was written in Greek and then translated into Latin and then into Old English and then into English. And when you see in the New Testament where it says John the Baptist is saying, repent, repent, repent. In the original Greek text, that word is metanoia, to have your mind changed. And it seems to me that that's what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't come in to change our mind. We don't come in and say, oh, let me change my thinking. No, we take a certain degree of action, and that action transforms us, it converts us, it changes our mind, and it changes how we behave, hence behavior modification. And this relates to whether you call it a psychic change, personality reorganization, spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, it doesn't matter. And this is a change of thinking that's resulted from a change in behavior. And what William James said in Varieties of Religious Experiences, our conceptions always require a sense content to work with. And as the words soul, God, immortality cover no distinctive sense content whatever, it follows that theoretically speaking, they are words devoid of any significance. Yet strangely enough, they have a definite meaning for our practice. We can act as if there were a God. We can act as if there were a God. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity says, the rule for all of us is perfectly simple. Do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. And in the big book on page 14, it says, and Bill's talking, he says, my friend, he's talking about his friend Ebby Thatcher, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles, taking action, in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said. And then in a story called Tightrope, in the 4th edition, we do see the phrase, act as if. That's a 4th edition story, and this is about an individual, he's gay, and he's trying to navigate the worlds that he lives in as a gay alcoholic. And he finally lands in AA, and he says and he's referring to his sponsor, suggested that for me a good starting point would simply be recognition of the fact that I had failed in running the world. In short, acceptance of the fact that I was not God. He also suggested that I might try occasionally to act as if I believed. To act as if I believed. Somewhere I had heard that it is easier to act yourself into a new way of thinking than to think yourself into a new way of acting. And this made sense in the context of acting as if. You know, we come in and one of the things that Bill talked about is get in the car. And this is a concept that is alien to most of us because I don't want to do anything you tell me to do. You know, in fact, I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I hear some of the older ladies and gentlemen saying, you know, honey, just don't leave before the miracle. So I just sit there and wait for the miracle. I don't do anything. And the miracle doesn't happen because I don't take action. And one of my favorite spiritual masters is a guy named Rumi. He's a Sufi mystic. And what Rumi says is, why ask about behavior when you are soul essence and a way of seeing into presence? Plus, you are with us. How could you worry? You may as well free a few words from your vocabulary. Why and how and impossible. Open the mouth cage and let those fly away. Forget the nonsense categories of there and here. Your soul and you are love. No more questions now as to what we are doing here. And that translates in my mind to get in the car. Get in the car. And, you know, my behavior before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous was bad, and my behavior after I got here was bad. I needed a lot of behavior modification. On page 52 in the big book, the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. And that's the delusion. I'm not aware. I'm not aware. When I get here, I'm 37 years old, and to give you a sense of what it was like towards the end of my drinking, this is how I'm a trial lawyer by trade, so when I drink, I like to drink beer and shoot tequila, because beer is a basic food group. Darren's with me, yeah. And tequila is like an accelerant, okay, because the beer doesn't get you there quick enough. So you drink beer and shoot tequila, you drink beer and shoot tequila. And what happens is, as I'm getting ready to prepare for trial, I take the file out and I put it out on the conference room table, or I put it out on my kitchen table. I start drinking beer and shooting tequila, drinking beer, shooting tequila. And what happens, and it's quite magical, I don't have to even open the file. Really. In my mind's eye, I'm in the courtroom, okay, and I pick a jury. I pick the jury that I want. I can tell they're with me. You know, I make an opening statement, and I'm not bragging, but it's really good. It's really good opening statement, right? And then I examine and cross-examine all the witnesses. I get in all the evidence that I need and want, and I exclude all the bad stuff, all the bad stuff. And then I make a closing argument. And again, I don't like to brag, but man, I mean, it's spectacular. It's just spectacular. And then what happens is the jury retires, and then they come out and they render a verdict in favor of my client. And this all happens through the magic of drinking beer and shooting tequila. But the only problem with this process is if you drink the way I drink, you never make it to the closing argument. I drink beer and shoot tequila till I pass out, right? So I have to set 3 to 5 alarm clocks at 3 to 5 minute intervals all around the room in different places, because 1 or 2 is not going to wake me up. By the 3rd or 4th, I'll get up. The 3rd or 4th goes off the next morning. I get up. A particular morning that I'm thinking of, I have a trial in Los Angeles Superior Court, and I'm not drunk, but I'm still feeling it. I shower, I shave, I put on a suit and tie. I'm looking pretty good, and I go down to court, and I'm picking a jury, and my client is a guy named Brian. And Brian is a high finance guy from New York City. And this is a case about other people's money. And we've been trying to resolve it for several years, but we haven't. Now we're picking a jury. We're picking a jury, and the Judge Lax, looks at us and says, look, I know you've been trying to resolve this for a couple years now, and you're going to tie my courtroom up for several weeks. So this is just about money. While the lawyers are picking a jury, why don't the clients talk and see if you can come to a resolution about this case? So I'm picking a jury, the clients are talking, I'm picking a jury, and around 11:30, my client's very excited. He says he's got a settlement. It's resolved several $1 million in his favor. He tells the judge is excited, the judge puts it on the record. He releases us. My client, Brian, looks at me and goes, this is great. Lamb, I know it's kind of early, it's before noon, but it seems like we should celebrate. Do you want to have a drink? And I'm thinking, what a country. Yeah, I totally want to have a drink, right? So we go to the Grand Avenue Bar, which is on Grand Avenue and 5th. Stick with me, it gets more complicated, okay? And it's on Grand Avenue and 5th. And unlike Diana, I'm not a bar drinker. I'll drink in a bar, but I mainly drink at home. And the bars I usually go to are kind of seedy. They have a little sawdust on the floor, and they have this kind of faint eau-de urine scent, which just motivates me. I don't know why. But this is a really high-end bar, a really high-end bar. And the bartender's got a little jacket on, bow tie, and it's mahogany. And we go there, and Brian has him take a bottle of dusty cognac off the top of the bar. And he puts it on the bar, and he takes out 2 large brandy snifters, and he plops them on the bar, and he uncorks that cognac, and he pours 1 fluid ounce into each of the brandy snifters. Now, when you put an ounce of tequila in a shot glass, you can see it. And if you're a good bartender, I got to lean over and, because you don't want to miss any of the nectar of the gods. But when you put 1 fluid ounce of cognac in a brandy snifter, you see it go in, right? But it's kind of sad and lonely and desperate. You got this amber shimmer against the walls, but I'm leaning over because I'm trying to find it. And Brian goes, "You've never had cognac before?" I'm like, "No, I never have." I'm not stupid. He's buying, I'm drinking, right? But he goes, "Okay, pay attention. There's a whole process and a protocol to this. What you want to do is you want to take that glass, that brandy snifter, and you want to cup it on the base of the palm of your hand so that the heat from the palm of your hand goes through the glass. That will warm up the cognac." I'm thinking, this is not necessary for tequila at all. But whatever. And then he says, you want to twirl it around. You want to coat the glass, right? And then after it's coated with glass, you want to bring it up to your nose. Don't snort it. Don't sniff it. Just allow the vapors to waft into your nostrils. Because you can really appreciate the bouquet that way. I'm thinking, we're going to drink this stuff, right? And he goes, and then you want to back it down. You want to bring it up to your lips. You don't want to drink it. You don't want to sip it. You just want to allow the cognac to drape across your palate. So by now, I'm looking at him, and I'm just kind of rocking back and forth, and And my eye is twitching, and I've got fuzzy teeth. The kind of fuzzy teeth you got right before you're going to have a drink. You know that, right, Barkley? And so Brian, he's right out of GQ. He does the whole thing, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And then he looks at me, he says, okay, Lamb, it's your turn. It's my turn. It's my turn. So I'm ready, And I twirl it around. I'm thinking, like, how warm does it need to get, right? So I'm going to bring it up, and I'm thinking I'm going to take a little nose hit. But no, not a big deal, right? And bam, I just shoot it like tequila. It's gone. And I don't know who was more surprised, Brian or me, right? And I just looked down. I reverted to the alcoholic anthem. I just said, I'm sorry. Can I have a beer? And he's a generous guy, so he's starting to buy me beer. I'm drinking beer, and he's doing what he's doing with his cognac, and he finishes after about 30, 40 minutes. And I know. And then, because he's gracious, he says, okay, pay attention. We're going to do it again. So he orders 2 more cognacs, right? And I'm thinking, I got this, right? And I twirl it around. And,
how much is this cognac? How much does it cost?
well, I'm not paying for it, but it's a couple $100 a shot, and...
That's a critical part of the...
Not to me, it ain't. But anyway, so I twirl it around, right? And I throw that back too. And Brian gives me that look like, man, that ain't right, And he's never read the big book, but he realizes at that moment that I am bodily and mentally different than he is, right? So he goes, look, man, it's about 1 o'clock. I'm going to go to the bathroom. It's almost 4 o'clock in New York. I'm going to go to the bathroom, then I head back to the hotel. I'm going to call the guys in New York, tell them the good news. Okay, fine. So I'm sitting there drinking my beer, minding my own business. He's in the bathroom. I look over and I see his cognac. Bam! I drink that, right? I go to the bathroom. I come back out. And Brian is arguing with the bartender because someone has stolen his cognac, right? I remind him, I'm a trial attorney. I am practicing the art of cross-examination. I'm going around, I'm examining people like Mark and Tim, and I mean, look at that face. He'd take it. And man, what are you doing with him, really? Do you have the backstory? Oh, you're not well either. Okay, I got it. I'm not judging, I'm just asking. Okay. But Brian's not stupid. He's what we now call an ex-client, and he's leaving. Now, this is a big account. I'm at a large international law firm, and I'm going to have to go back. I'm going to have some explaining to do. But because I'm an alcoholic and I haven't had my behavior modified, I'm thinking, well, this is good. I'll drink the way I want to drink. So I sit down, I get a table, and drink a beer, shoot tequila, drink a beer, shoot tequila. Now, a lot of people, they forget to do vital things like eat when they're drinking. That is not my story. I like to have a light snack, nothing big, like a couple cheeseburgers, pizza, something like that, right? I drink beer or shoot tequila, maybe I eat a pizza, and I don't mean to be gross and disgusting, but I am in Nashville, and I think you guys can handle it. What happens is, I drink beer and I shoot tequila, and after a pizza, so I just start farting. I know it's not an impressive skill set to everybody except Barkley, but I got to tell you, if you're wasted, it's entertaining. I got this whole purple haze thing going on, and I'm selfish. I'm self-centered. There's a couple women. They're off in the corner. They're looking at me, and because I suffer from delusions, I'm thinking, oh yeah, they want me. They want me. I mean, who wouldn't want this, right? And I'm drinking beer, shooting tequila. I'm barking them off, and I go to lift my leg to be particularly melodic, and I miscalculate. Yeah, it'll almost snap you back to sober, I'll tell you. And now the bad part is, this is not a new event. This has happened before. And I got to tell you, if you're going to go out there and do this, I'm going to give you a little hint. One of the things you want to do is you want to keep that leg cocked. Don't make contact with a chair. So I got that leg cocked. I'm acting cool, right? Like this is all part of the plan, right? I finish my beer and I just slide out on one cheek. You just slide out on one cheek so you don't make contact. I go in the bathroom, I take off the jacket, I take off the pants, I take off my drawers, I clean myself up. I'm out at the sink. I put my pants back on, my jacket. I'm rinsing my drawers out at the sink, What, Mike? Come on. And some guy looks at me just like Mike did. I'm like, what do you don't practice hygiene? I mean, get with it. So I wring them out a little bit. I go back in the stall. I put them back on. I put my jacket and my pants back on. And because I have a delusion problem, I'm walking out and I'm thinking, that went pretty well. Followed almost immediately by, man, these drawers are kind of damp. I'm feeling sexy. Who knows what might happen? And, finally I get kicked out, and I drive home. I park in my driveway, your driveway. I'm an equal opportunity driveway kind of guy. And I go through the front door. The front door is a double wide garage door. I don't park my car there. I just put it up because there's no way I'm going to get a key. That's just impossible, right? And I walk in, and right next to the door, there's 3 steps up to the living room. And there's a fridge. And inside that fridge, there's beer. And I don't care if I've been out for 3 hours or 3 days, I stop and get I drink no matter what. I go upstairs, drink the beer, I put it on the floor on the nightstand, and a few hours later on a good night, I get up, I wander around, I'm in the hall, I maybe go in the closet, I find my wife's boots, I pee in her boots or a trash can or something like that. And on a bad night, I wet the bed. I wet the bed. So that's what I bring to the party. And you would think that type of behavior would get one to stop drinking. But I'm selfish and self-centered. I don't much care for you. You are bothered by my behavior. I don't like you. So I don't really care. And you're a price that I'm willing to pay to be able to do that. And I keep doing that, and then finally I come into Alcoholics Anonymous. I got popped for a DUI, which is no big deal. I used to drive drunk all the time, but now I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and you are telling my story. The facts and details are different, but you are telling my story. And I realize I've understood for years that I'm an alcoholic of the first half of the first step, that I can't. I'm powerless over alcohol. My wife sends me out to get milk. I come back 3 days later. I met Darren or Larry. We start drinking beer, shooting tequila. It's 3 days later. I engage in time travel, which I now realize is blacking out. And I come back, but I get the milk. I'm like, hey, baby, I've got the milk. She's not impressed. She's not impressed. So I got that, but the whole unmanageability thing I don't get. And I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and people are talking about surrender. Surrender. You got to surrender. Cliff Roach, God bless him, he died. I'll show him a little bit more credit than you did, Howard. That was harsh. Harsh. God. You've heard the Big Bang Theory that he's done, right?
Yes.
You're going to get sucked into a black hole, my friend. I'm telling you. And its name is Howard. Anyway, so Cliff used to say that the first 3 steps are the formal terms of surrender. Well, I was in the Army for 13 and a half years. I went through airborne school, Ranger school. I went through Special Forces training. I was a Green Beret. So when I went through Ranger school, they had a Ranger creed. And part of the Ranger creed is surrender is not a Ranger word. Okay. Then I get to Special Forces. There's a creed in Special Forces, and it goes like this. I will never surrender. I will never surrender. I pray that if I am ever captured, I have the strength to spit in the face of my enemy. We don't surrender. And I have a buddy of mine that, and Bill knows him, he's in our home group, and he comes in and he likes to say that, surrender means to lay down your arms and join the winning side. What a crock of crap. Guy's never been in the military. If you lay down your arms, you don't join the winning side. You go to an enemy prisoner of war camp or you're killed. You don't join the winning side. And if you join the winning side, that's called treason. It's But everybody's talking about surrender. So I go to Michael, my sponsor, when I finally got a sponsor, and I said, I don't think I can do this because I can't surrender. He goes, really? Well, why don't you find that in the book and come back? And this is before, you can look at it electronic. You can't do an electronic search. So I read the whole damn book. There's no surrender in the book. He's like, well, it's not. He said, read the 12 and 12. I read the 12. It's not in the 12 and 12. There's no surrender. The word doesn't appear. It does talk about abandoning yourself to God as you understand God, but it doesn't talk about surrender. But one of the things that got me about this is he said, look, if it's not in the book, you don't have to do it. But one of the things that he pointed out was we get caught up on words. I don't like surrender. Okay? But he had this thing, it's called a dictionary. We had to look stuff up. We would read, just like Bill, we'd read a paragraph, he would ask me, what does that word mean? I'm a lawyer, I make crap up, it doesn't bother me, He would whip out the dictionary, right? Well, surrender has the military text concept, but it also has a legal context. It is to abandon your right, title, and interest to something, like to surrender your title to a car. Can I surrender my right, title, and interest in alcohol? But I don't have a choice. I can do that. One of the things that a lot of people have a problem with is the word God. It's probably the oldest old idea that we have. That's why we use so many different terms for it in the big book. But I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. And one of the things that happened to me, my behavior modification started because I was going crazy in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm 100 days sober. I'm stark raving sober. And I go to Pittsburgh. I'm doing some depositions, getting ready for a trial. And I get done in midweek. I go back to the room. I have an honor bar in the room. An honor bar. I am a newcomer. I have no honor. But they've given me this mini fridge. I've got the key to it. It doesn't have everything I want and need in it, but it's a really good start. Like 2 by 2 by 2 bourbon, scotch, vodka, no tequila, which was annoying, but it's good. It's good. Beers, domestics import, and then crap like water and soda and stuff, which you push off to the side. And I'm suffering from this false sense of separation that Bill talked about. The 12 and 12 calls it anxious apartness. I love the big book, I love the 12 and 12, but when I was new, my sponsor had me listen to a series of talks by a guy named Chuck Chamberlain. And in 1975, he did a retreat in Palo Mesa. And after he passed in the 80s, one of his sponsees had it transcribed. They put it in a book. It's called A New Pair of Glasses. And it's just one man's journey through Alcoholics Anonymous. But in that book, there's a drawing. And the drawing is a really simple drawing. What Chuck does is he draws a circle. And inside that circle, he puts all the people, plants, and animals inside the circle of life. And then he puts life, good, God, whatever your concept of a higher power is, inside the circle of life. And then he draws a stick man outside the circle. And that's me, and that's Chuck. And because you're here at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm assuming it's you. I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's you. And what separates us is a thin line that Chuck identifies as ego or conscious separation from God. Like Bill talked about in the 11th step, we're trying to get conscious contact. But I got conscious separation. Now the reality is after you work the steps, you realize that it's impossible to be outside the circle of life. And the better reality is there's not an edge to the circle. But I can't see that until I've worked the steps. And I'm a newcomer. And I don't have a God of my understanding. I don't have a sponsor. I don't have nothing. So I'm trying to distract myself because I want to drink. So I flip on the television. And I'm flipping back and forth between religious television and porno. Religious television and... You too, huh, Mark? Yeah, and the bad part is I'm getting confused as to who's doing what on what station. But that's a personal problem. But I don't drink, and I go home, and I get up the next morning, but I got a newcomer plan, and my newcomer plan involves this. When I was in the military, I got out in '93. My last job in the military, by the way, was I had become a JAG. They sent me to law school. I became a JAG, and I was working in the Pentagon. I was the intelligence oversight advisor to the United States Army. That should concern you. Yeah.
That is really frightening. Homeland Security.
And when I got out in 1993. I had a kit bag. I had some weapons, some demo, and 13 passports in it. And I didn't even think about it as stealing when I left. I just thought, this might come in handy one day, right? And in 1996, in the fall, this is the day. And I'm not going to use the weapons or demo, but I need the passports. And my newcomer plan is I'm going to take my blue tourist passport. And I'm going to leave the country on my name with my photograph. Then I'm going to start flipping identities and names. I'm going to head over to Europe for a while. British Columbia, head over to Europe, come back, 2 weeks, Steve Lamb will cease to exist. Now, I got a wife and I got a daughter. But I'm selfish and self-centered. This is a career change. I don't even think about them, right? My behavior hasn't been modified at all. And my plan is that I'm gonna once my name has been changed, I'm gonna head down to Costa Rica. I've got some interesting buddies of mine that are doing some marketing and distribution down in Costa Rica, and that's my newcomer plan. And I lay all this stuff out, and my blue tourist passport is current; it hasn't expired, but my other passports have all expired. And I did that backwards. The blue tourist passport, my legitimate passport, had expired, but the 13 that I should have turned in have not. So I can't leave on my name. And the pathetic thing is, this is pre-9/11. I could have flown to British Columbia on my driver's license. But I've been to law school. I went to college. I went to law school. The Army sent me to get an LLM, a Master of Laws, right next to the University of Virginia. I'm licensed to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States. But I did not have the synaptic capacity. I think Diana talked about MOCUS last night, mind out of focus. I just couldn't do it. So, I eventually got a sponsor that day as a result of that, because I was just out of options. I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. And you know, I start doing stuff like, I remember my sponsor told me I should get a commitment in my home group. So I asked the guy at my home group, it's the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag, and he says, get a mop. Like, I'm a lawyer. He goes, yeah, lawyers look good with mops. Now, let me tell you how behavior modification looks, because it's really subtle. I'm mopping, I'm cussing, I'm just pissed, I'm writing inventory, I got a mop, right? 3 weeks go by and I'm not, you know, I got a groove. And by the way, we're so bizarre at my home group that the way we did it back then was I had half the room and Jerry has the other half. And there's a line, and it's not on the ground, but damn it, it's there, you know? Now, 3 months into it, I'm mopping and Jerry's not there, it's a new guy, Mark. He's over the line. He's doing my commitment. And I'm like, hey, I'm working here. You know, I'm absurd because I don't understand the concept of service until I get to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't understand that service is a demonstration of love. It's not an emotion. It's not a sexual event. It's action. And it's through that action that my mind starts to change. And one of the things that I find so remarkable about this is when I was I was very upset with my wife for a variety of reasons, which are completely illogical and make no sense to anybody but me, because I'm in a delusion, and I'm just pissed. And I used to refer to her as the malcontented bitch from hell. I know. Sorry. I was occasionally referred to as a dick with ears, so it's just so you know, it's not. I think the latter phrase was more accurate, but I would go to Michael and I would complain, you know, and I said, all these people are talking about the family afterward. When's the family afterward going to? And he would take me to the book, and he would say, well, it looks like it's after how it works, into action, working with others, a lot of stuff that you haven't done yet. And my experience, particularly with behavior modification, is I get better in the rooms first, and then at work, and lastly at home, with the people that I love the most. I think because I have the highest expectations of them and the biggest demands. But I can't understand that because I'm new and I'm upset, and I'm doing inventory, and I'm after a while things get better. And I only see this and know this looking back. But I remember that when I had about 10 years sober, my sponsor's wife, Christy, took a cake for I think 15 or 16 years. And she talked about how she used to see me come up the steps with my big book and my notebook to do work. And that she would think to herself, oh great, Michael and I will probably stay married for another week because this guy's problems are just off the hook. Because I'm talking to him about my wife, Lynn, and that's making Christy look better. And then I get a guy, Stephen, and he's got a wife, Ellen, and he's reading me this inventory about Ellen. And I'm thinking, man, my wife's not that bad at all. And then Stephen, who's complaining constantly about Ellen, gets a sponsee named Richard. And I get a call one time, and Stephen is laughing his butt off. And he's like, man, you can't believe this. We went to this meeting and there was a break and we went out to have cake. And apparently Richard's wife put a GPS device in his phone and tracked him down. And she's pissed because he didn't do something that he said he was going to do. So she grabbed the cake and started smacking him with the cake. Cake is flying all over the place. And I can't believe it. And he's laughing. And I'm like, how are things going with Ellen? He goes, great. Things are going great. They're going great. So it's not that we want to benefit off others' suffering, but it's interesting because it gives us a perspective, and that's behavior modification. Bill.
Well, I think that's probably pretty good, huh? Would anybody else like to share? No, I'm just kidding. So tomorrow we're going to go through the amends process. We're going to tell a little bit more of the story. My experience, like most of us, a lot of people here, is that when you look back My sponsor told me at 6 months sober, he said, when you've done your fifth step, when you go to your house today after this, when you stick the key in the door, think about the guy that walked through that door 6 months ago compared to the guy that walked through that door today. And that's when I had that thought, it's going to be like this now. Because I really reflected on that, and my God, everything's different. And what I can report to you, 34 years later, it's never stopped. That evolutionary process has never stopped. This year, my third wife and I, we'll talk more about that, we have been together for 25 years. Right? She'll be sober 29 years at the end of this month, and we're going to have a big party and stuff. Every July we have a party. But that relationship, and the relationship with my children, and the relationship with my 2 ex-wives, what I can tell you today is they all come to the house. You know, they all come to the house. My second wife and I were like brother and sister, and probably tomorrow we'll talk more about what happened with all that. But I have been transformed, and as far as I can tell, I'm not done yet. You know, I don't think it ever stops. I think life is dynamic. It's not static. And we believe that we're going to arrive somewhere, then it's going to be like this. And I don't think that's what's going on. We need to remain flexible with our eyes open. And what's the next thing coming? The next thing that comes may be something absolutely incredibly wonderful. You know, the next indicated thing many times is really cool. It's not all negative and bad. And my labeling of it is the only thing that causes the suffering. I mean, how many of us in this room have sat and said something has happened to us and go, this is the worst thing that could possibly have ever happened to me? And then 5 years later go, thank God that happened. I wouldn't, you know. I mean, really, that's a real live experience that most of us around here, especially if we're older, have had. You know, where the seeming bad, it wasn't so bad. And it probably just needed to happen, because now here I'm in a better place. So anyway, let's have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning.
We're going to circle up and do the Lord's Prayer.
Lord's Prayer.